You're listening to Gameday Tarps podcast, coast to coast, with your hosts, Ryley, Dakota, Dallas, Daeden, and Wilbs.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Gameday Tarps podcast. This is episode 49 with two friends of the show returning, Colton Davies from Daily Faceoff and Jon Keen from the Kamloops Blazers. How are you gentlemen doing tonight?
Doing good, man.
Yeah, great to be back. Lots to discuss since the last time we chatted, so let's get into it.
All right, yeah, you two, John and Colton, you guys had the inside track in the WHL. You don't have to tell us all your secrets. We know there's a lot, but kind of give us, especially you, John. I mean, it almost seemed like you were the guy on WHL Twitter, WHL X, whatever you want to call it, who was spearheading a lot of these moves. Give us kind of what your life was like, because we reached out for a video and you were like, honestly, just can't do it. Too busy. And that's fine because you were killing it. So let us know what that was like for you.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I had my phone plugged in at all times. There was always something going on. And if it wasn't quite yet going on, something was really close to being done. And then it's just a matter, guys, of making sure, you dot your I's and you cross your T's and you make sure that the information you're about to put out there is legitimate, is accurate, and that the players involved in the deal know. And that's the biggest thing for me. Everybody, the top names that we'll discuss here, they all knew that something was going to happen, but for a lot of times it's the 17-year-old or the 18-year-old going back in a trade that might be unaware and doesn't expect it to happen. So those are the ones you have to be sensitive of, and we tried our best to make sure we were informative yet respectful of the process as well.
Awesome. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun little thrill to be behind the scenes and dealing with all that. And like John said, I mean, obviously, John kind of was being the Frank Saravalli of the WHL, but you kind of had a little more respect in the sense of not putting out everybody's names and letting teams handle that stuff. But I thought it was super cool to have that insider info and have you kind of doing that. And I know I texted you a couple times and we kind of talked a little bit about some things, but I mean, I was pretty tapped in with stuff, obviously with Jeff Merrick starting with Daily Faceoff. He's been a boatload of knowledge and kind of helping get things going there. But yeah, I mean, like the big names, like you said, I think it was talked about for a lot of those guys were talked about for about a week or so, and they kind of knew what was going to happen. And so, yeah, the younger guys, of course, are where they don't really know. Of course, you got to kind of be careful, which is like what John did. But yeah, it was a fun time being around all of that and doing that type of stuff and being involved in the deadline.
I guess for both of you guys, John and Colton, what was the biggest move in your minds this deadline?
I'll go first. I think we all knew who the big four, the big five were, and three of those were on the back end. It's just a matter of where Tanner Mollendijk, where Caden Price, and where Sawyer Minio were going to go. And then everybody knew that Kelowna had to make a move on Andrew Crystal as well. Hard to say what the biggest move was. I think those four are all similar in nature. But I think for me, just the wow factor of Spokane going after Andrew Crystal to put him on a line with Berkeley Catton, and that was the plan. That was the design plan. They were locked in with Kelowna fairly early in the process. I don't know if there was a lot of other teams involved in Andrew Crystal, and they found to make it work. And what magic we had on the weekend, right? That line puts up 19 points, and it's almost like as advertised, right? Like, it's like a video game, and those guys went off. So I think for me, that was a big one to, kind of put those two stars together on the same line. And that's what I would say.
And what a shocker it was, too, because we just had Colton on the pod last week, and we were talking about Everett. Everett was in the talks. They're one of the big dogs this season. It was really surprising to see that them move Bo Courtney and Overager to the Kamloops Blazers, and we're thinking to ourselves, okay, they're gearing up for something big here, guys. They could be landing Andrew Crystal. Maybe the asking price was too high and just Everett didn't want to pay up so big. But they're also not in a desperate scenario right now. They're not in do or die mode like a lot of these other franchises like PG. It's do or die for them. They got Cohen Zemer and Ryley Height moving on, right? And a couple of the Spokane guys. So I think, Spokane definitely one of the biggest winners. That top line, guys, we all know it. 19 points between their 3 top line guys. Cristal 7.9 in his debut. Like, I think, yeah, Spokane just really pulled it off well, and they got a lot of big things coming this playoff push.
Yeah, you know
I
what?
think
The guy we're not talking about is Shea Van Olm, a former Blazer, and I jokingly refer to maybe you guys are too young for the movie, but I jokingly call Shea Van Olm the Forrest Gump of the WHL because he
Yeah.
keeps on walking into these fantastic situations, like Memorial Cup in Edmonton. Then he's traded to Kamloops, Memorial Cup in Kamloops. Then he ends up in Spokane. He's playing with Berkeley Catton and Andrew Crystal. Like, I'm waiting for him to sign with Alabama here and run a touchdown back. It's I like Shea, but boy, he's had a lot of good fortune to go his way. So good for him. Congratulations.
And the crazy
And
thing
there's a
is that like when trades happen and big trades happen, sometimes it takes a little bit to come. But the fact that first game debut for Chris Stahl with Spokane and they just light it up like that, like that's huge, especially with that line alone. Like that's just huge for them.
What about you, Colton? What would you say the biggest move of the deadline was?
like it probably would be Crystal as well, because it was so like anticipated that Kelowna would have to move him, and that the tear he went on as well before like the World Juniors, and during that him not even being invited, I think that really upped his stock, and him of course just obliterating the league this year and being one of the best players across the entire CHL. His trade alone, I think, was like the big one, because you're already seeing the result of that with the 7-point night and what him and Catton are already doing. And I think that's, in the grand scheme of things, that's going to be the best trade for everybody to look back on. And Kelowna also benefits off of it too, with getting Papanakis, and then of course with them trading Caden Price and getting Will Sharp, that adds some depth for them for next year. And Will Sharp's going to be great next year as well. So yeah, I think for me it was Crystal, because a couple days prior to that trade, I was kind of tipped off about him being talked about with a top United States team, and I thought Everett, because Everett just had to do something. And in the grand scheme of things, Everett didn't have to do anything because Austin Rose was coming back, and I guess they knew that. So that kind of changed probably their mindset and how the trade was going to go for them. But the way the trade kind of panned out with Spokane was interesting to me, and I thought it would be a lot more to it. Like there'd be a lot more pieces involved, but it seems like the trade worked out well for both teams.
So I made a post a little while back of my predictions on who's going to be buyers and sellers this upcoming deadline, and I put Saskatoon obviously in the sellers market. And a couple people approached me and said, "Why did I do that? They're like second in the Eastern Conference at the time." And I said, "Well, they're in a sticky situation, right? Think of 2 years prior, right? We had Wenatchee second in the Western Conference. They still had Geeky and Savoy. Zach Benson moved on to the Buffalo Sabres." And I said to them, well, because of that run last year against the Moose Jaw Warriors, they now are in they got their hands tied behind their back where they have to get some draft capital. So I think a sleeper dark horse player out of this whole draft, out of the trade market, I think Ben Reich moving out of the Saskatoon Blades to the PG Cougars. Mark Lamb definitely had to pay a little bit, but I think it's a win-win for both clubs, and he's definitely been a great addition for the PG Cougars. So maybe he could lead the PG Cougars past a Western Conference final to the WHL finals. Hoping to see them come out victorious for sure.
And on that trade, really, Dallas, I talked to Mark Lamb this weekend, and he says he was in all these big names. He was in. How close he wasn't really sure, but all in all, they targeted a left-handed centerman. That was their need, that was their want, and they got that in Ben Reich. And price tag fairly high, right? Like Ben Reich isn't like when you think of like big names, Ben Reich maybe not quite there yet, but on the trade he was sixth in league scoring. They paid a big price, to give up Hunter Lang and to give up a first round pick and 5 pieces. Like that's a lot. And instant dividends. He goes in there opening night of his after the trade and scores the winner in the final minute. And you're gonna feel a little bit better about spending 5 pieces when a guy can come in and make a debut like that for sure.
I was just gonna ask, would you guys say, is there any team out there that maybe could have done more, or just was maybe very lackluster at the deadline?
I would probably say Everett, like just cause like you think they're the top team, like they're one of the top teams in the league. Like you thought maybe they would have done something to try and go for that last run, but I don't know. I guess I kind of talked myself out of it when I explained the Austin Rose stuff earlier. So, but Everett would kind of be my team, I guess.
It's Prince George for me and that fan base. And, I worked with Mark Lamb for a year in Swift Current. He's not a guy that's going to, make a major trade. I don't think multiple first round picks. But, last year with that team, they held off on making a big deal, making a big splash, almost to the fan base's, you know, um, knowledge that perhaps they would make the big splash this year. And they were linked to Tanner Mollendijk. He's up from McBride up there, which is close to Prince George. He was linked to Ryley Height, with Braden Yeager because of his ties with Ryley Height. So Prince George was, by all accounts, supposed to get involved in one of these big name players, and they shied away from that a little bit. So, this is year 2 of their window. They didn't make the splash last year. We saw teams all around them make the splash. We saw Portland make the splash, with Danielson. And that was maybe a piece they were missing to put them over the top, was one of these big name guys. They didn't do it. So, I think there was, a feeling in Prince George that they would, break the bank, and they didn't do it. So I guess we'll see how it goes the next few months here.
John, are you surprised that Swift Current really didn't try to, be in seller's mode? Because going back to what I alluded to earlier about how Connor Geeky, one of the 2 big names out of Wenatchee last season at the deadline, like he got traded to Swift Current, for their big playoff run last year. I would have honestly thought personally that maybe Misselbacher would have been a big trade piece out there. Maybe a few teams could have been calling, and I'm sure he could have fetched a good couple draft picks for sure. Like I know Swift Current could probably be hurting a little bit for some capital here in the next few years in terms of draft picks.
Yeah, you know what? And that Swift could have went either way. For me, though, they've decided to kind of keep the band together and go at it one more time. They don't have a first round pick in 25. They don't have a first round pick in 26, but they do have an opportunity to get a pick. And I would not be surprised if Swift Current at the trade or at the draft floor moves out a guy and gets a pick in that first round, or maybe an extra second round pick. Like I could see Swift Current doing something on draft day that gets him into that first round. And I would see maybe a dance partner being like a Kelowna Rockets as well. So they have multiple first round picks now. I think that's the way that Swift Current finds a way to get a first round pick in the draft here in 25.
The 3-team trade we saw, do you know much about that? It's hard enough to get 2 teams to agree. You don't see many multi-team trades. What were we hearing on that 3-team trade? I know it wasn't necessarily like groundbreaking how big it was, but the intricacy of a 3-way deal itself is kind of a big deal in this small of a league.
Yeah, by all accounts, Swift and Red Deer were ready to go on with what they were about to do. And I had the trade in advance, and I was ready to kind of say, hey, what's going on? Are we doing this? Are you guys doing this, or what's going on? And then there was a snag, there was a holdup, and it's like, we got a third team. I was like, okay, all right, like pull the throttle back on this and see what this is all about. And Red Deer got in there. Moose Jaw kind of found a way to, I guess Red Deer really coveted Keaton Dowheniak. They like the 20-year-old defenseman, and they really could have had him for free at one point earlier this year, but they got involved, and Dowheniak became part of that deal, and the rest is history. So we see at the odd time there's a 3-way trade probably once or twice a year, and Moose Jaw wanted to get in on things, so it was exciting.
Nice. Do boys out east have any of your big OHL or QMJHL trades that have gone down that you want to talk about right now? Or maybe anything that didn't happen too?
I can talk about two. I can talk about 2. So Oshawa Generals acquiring Andrew Gibson. I think that's an incredible ad for the Jennies. I mean, he is in his debut. I think it was his debut, or it was the second game. He scored the game winner for them. So I think it was a pretty clutch move by the Gens, because they're trying to get back to the OHL finals, because they did not be successful. They weren't successful last year. And then Jet Luchenko not going anywhere was very surprising to me. I thought Luchenko would have been gone.
That's what I was thinking too, especially with London being so heavy apparently.
Yeah, that was
even Luca Pinelli.
Yeah, Luca Pinelli too. That's another guy.
The Pinelli stuff is kind of funny though, why that one didn't go through. But because there was because from what I was told, the trade was on the table, right? Like they had the trade, but then Brantford called it off because of what had happened in the back behind the scenes. So the Pinelli could have been on his way, but it never ended up coming to fruition. So, and from what Merrick kind of said to me, it sounded like it was a bit of a disaster how it unfolded and just kind of came to a collapse. But with Luchenko, I'm pretty sure I thought London was in on him, but I don't know what happened there.
You know what's the biggest surprise out of this entire deadline? I think is Sudbury out of the OHL were buyers, guys. They were buyers. Talks all season about Quentin Musty could have been on his way out by the deadline, even though his injury prolonged him afterwards. But still, like they were buyers. They sounded a haul to the 67s for Henry Muse, Calgary Flames prospect. And boy, oh boy, was that a huge haul. And maybe it could lift him into the playoffs further. But yeah, what do you guys think about that? That was crazy development.
I think like because Sudbury has proven to be like that good team, so maybe like they needed help on the back end. That's what they needed, and obviously Krawchuk is their goaltender. So, and I'm pretty sure they still have Vondras. I think I'm not certain on that, but the back end is what they needed help on most. So they ended up getting Muse. They ended up getting Noah Roberts. So Roberts is a gritty, stay-at-home type of defenseman. So it was a huge ad for them, and then obviously getting Musey and they beat Kingston 10-6, and Kingston's also up there in the East for, trying to be a top dog. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. But Sudbury, the only way they are winners in this deadline is that they make it all the way, because that when you're pushing for, that OHL championship, you got to push to win that. And I don't know. Sudbury has a lot of top dogs they have to figure out how to beat, like Barrie. But Barry's one of them. Brampton's one of them. Osh was one of them. Like the East, it's all over. West, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone knows who the favorites are in the West, but there's not a lot of teams that like I feel like because London is the top dog there, and then you got Windsor and Kitchener up there, but I just don't know if anyone's gonna be able to beat London in the West. I just don't see anyone beating them.
Windsor,
not happening.
Well, the one thing I like about the Muse trade is he's not even considered really a rental, right? Like they could have him for probably 1 or 2 more years, and then or they could trade him down the road for their picks or for picks back in return.
Yeah, he's only an 06, so yeah, it's perfect for Sudbury. You know what's crazy though is like 18 assets went to Saginaw, right? Another big seller that we all knew would be, a trade target, but 18 assets out of Kingston to the Saginaw Spirit for guys like Ethan Hay and that. So it was crazy.
Yeah, 2 separate trades with 9 assets in each one. 3 players.
Joey Willis.
Kingston. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, when you host Memorial Cup, you hope that you have a couple of, assets returning the next year so you can recoup. We saw that in Kamloops, and of course, it was Saginaw's turn. And you know what? Lo and behold, it'll be Kelowna's turn here in a couple of years to see, who returns. Maybe it is a Sharp, maybe it is a Papanicus at 19, or that you can get some value from to try and recoup after all is said and done.
Jon and Colton, this one's for you guys though. Would you like to see an Iginla brothers reunite in the Kelowna Rockets organization for a Memorial Cup run next year? Do you think that could be in the cards?
Go ahead, Colton.
That'd be cool. I mean, that would take some work, but I mean, that'd be pretty special.
How tight is Edmonton hanging on? Do you know?
Well, I do know. Now, I can't confirm it, but there was talk that Edmonton and Kelowna were involved in a Andrew Crystal, Joe Iginla type of thing here. But remember, Joe's 16, so next year would be that window. You can't trade 16-year-olds, but I mean, I wouldn't put it past. Wouldn't put it past something happening to get Joe back in the Okanagan, and of course, Jerome lives there in the off season. And it's funny because, as you know, the Kelowna Rockets just went through a coaching change, and someone on Twitter asked me which one of their parents is going to coach the team next year after Adam Foote coached both the boys there. And, then it's like, well, you got 2 Iginlas. Maybe Jerome, although I don't think he's interested in that. But a funny correlation from the last time that Kelowna hosted the tournament. So we'll wait and see what happens.
Throwing it back, I guess, John and Colton, we were just talking about the Memorial Cup and the trade deadline, Christmas time. It's usually the time that teams start to say, hey, let's turn it up a notch. And I guess which teams do you think you'll see probably coming out of the coming out of the WHL, the top two teams that could come out to go to the Memorial Cup?
Medicine Hat and Spokane.
I was going to say Medicine Hat and Spokane, probably. Like, you can't deny what Gavin McKenna's doing. I mean, if Medicine Hat gets Caden Lindstrom back for the playoffs, even though I don't know if they will. But, like, even if they get him back, that's just a game changer for them. Molendyke's there, obviously, now. Like, that Medicine Hat team is just geared up and ready to go for a dominant run. And then, I mean, you just saw what Kat and Chris all did together, and Spokane's been good, and they're only going to continue to get better. I love Mathis Preston on that team too. He's young, he's super talented. But yeah, for me, it's definitely Spokane and Medicine Hat.
I was just asked this question on a recent show, who I think would meet in the WHL final, and I kind of bucked the trend a little bit. I said Calgary and Spokane. So I really like what the Hitmen have done. They have a lot of depth. You need your back end to be able to sustain some losses, some playoff attrition, and now you got Yakimchuk back there. You got Sawyer Minio back there. Axel Hertig at a Strong World Juniors. There's a lot of depth. Kalen Parker won a WHL title last year in Moose Jaw. So that was my pick, but it could really go any way, guys. Like, of those teams, and you look at the body of work that Calgary, Medicine Hat, and Lethbridge have done recently. They've combined now for 14 straight wins. They've been somehow available to not play each other in that stretch. That'll change soon, but yeah, I had Calgary, I had Spokane, Mathis Preston. I'm happy you pointed that out, Colton. I mean, here's a guy that could be a top 3 NHL pick, next year, maybe right after Gavin McKenna. Keaton Verhoff for me, and Victoria's another guy in that conversation. But it's going to be great to watch. I think there's 4 teams in the West. There's probably 4 in the East that think they could get there. So we'll watch how it plays out.
I got one on the draft pick topic. Landon Dupont. Do you think he could be the best defenseman the WHL has ever seen come his draft year? Like, as a draft, obviously not as a 20-year-old, because those kids are, sometimes you get a 20-year-old or a guy like Niedermeyer who's hanging around and it's not even fair. They shouldn't even be here. But in a draft year, do you think he could be the best drafted defenseman the WHL has ever seen?
Well, Colton's probably more of the draft expert in that. I think, he's trending that way. We've never seen this before. We've never seen a 15-year-old defenseman do this in the league before, come in. And what's the ceiling? Does he just keep on getting better? Does he just keep on progressing? Does he grow a little bit more? That could definitely answer the question in years to come. One thing was posed to me yesterday. Does Landon Dupont make Canada's World Junior team at 16? And around the table of some really good hockey people that have been involved with Hockey Canada before, they said undoubtedly yes, that he will be part of that team next year at 16. So, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Will he be the best ever? There's been a lot of good ones. There's been a lot of good WHL defensemen. It's tough. What is he, 40 games into his WHL career? So I guess we'll see how it plays out for sure.
Yeah. And in regards to Team Canada, his dad is like Hockey Canada's darling. Right, Mickey Dupont played like 20 years for Team Canada at the Spangler or something, right? So he's got a lot of ties with Hockey Canada to have some potential say if they do bring his kid to camp and where that leads.
I think it's impossible to leave him out of the selection camp process. And whatever happened this year, guys, too, with best players available or whatnot, Hockey Canada's taken a pounding here in the last week or so. So I don't think there'll be any sort of pet favorites or niche players. Landon Dupont's going to be at camp and he probably makes the team. But again, we'll see. It's a year away, so we'll see how it plays out. Colton?
Yeah, I think like you said, like he's only in his first year, but everything that he's been doing is trending towards him becoming a generational defenseman and player all around. And I think you can't even use that term lightly with him because he is just next level. You like, even you go back to what he's done prior to the WHL, and he's just like blown apart every single league he's ever played in, and he's doing that right now as a 16-year, or how old is he? 14, 15?
Just turned 16.
So 16. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
But like, it's just crazy to me how good he is at his age. So give it a couple years, and like we're not even like 2027, right? Like we're a couple years away from his draft year yet. I think by his draft year, we could be seeing a guy who could put up, like the Zane Perrick numbers of 98 to 110 points a year, and it's going to be back-to-back seasons of him putting up incredible numbers that haven't been seen in a long time.
One thing I was thinking of too with him, as the last thing on him. So say he doesn't grow much. Do you see him undoubtedly going first overall? But he's extremely offensive talented. Do you think if he stays like 5'7", 5'8", an NHL team saying, "Hey, you're gifted offensively, let's try and make the switch," right? Like protect you, not have you going back in the corners with a guy like Ryan Reeves coming in on you almost a foot taller, right? Like, do you think the NHL, like we all know the NHL is scared of small guys, and especially small defensemen? Quinn Hughes is a very rare exception. Unless he's like that, do you see them wanting to protect him and try and switch? Like, it'd be rare for them to ask a high prospect, but what are your thoughts on that, just size-wise?
Well, yeah, that would be difficult, especially with a highly touted guy like that. And, you mentioned Quinn Hughes. He's a guy that I think Quinn Hughes is like, forget Norris. I think he should be in the conversation for the Hart Trophy. Like, he's just that good. Like, you forget how good he is out there. He is a special talent. So is Cale Makar. And Cale Makar didn't really blossom until late. So, I think that'd be a big ask to change a guy into that mindset, into that situation. When you're an undersized defenseman as well, you know what? You're going to be surrounded by players that will police, some sort of heavy contact, some sort of, guys really finishing their checks. It's just the way it works. The NHL will also want to protect its asset too. So
for sure,
I don't really see a change in position happening, but I'm sure the DuPont family is like, be nice to be a little couple inches taller for sure.
Dally and I talked about this earlier, but do you think Medicine Hat's kind of kicking themselves in the teeth for trading Mercick for Ryder Ritchie earlier off in the season?
Yeah.
Mercick's lighting it up for Prince Albert.
Yeah, he is,
So-
though, again.
Here's the stat I read, guys. So in 23 games played for both guys, it was, I think, Ryder Ritchie with Med Hat. He only had 23 points in 24 games. And then you have Thomas Mercick just lighting it up for the PA Raiders with 59 points in the same amount of games played. And I'm like, you know what? He's really blossoming there in PA and Northern Sask. But I also want to mention that the Raiders, with their record lately, like they're almost a dark horse in the Eastern Conference, guys. Like even the addition of Ryley Kovacevic out of Moose Jaw, like look out. They could honestly upset a lot of guys like the Calgarys, the Lethbridges, or the Met Hats. So yeah, watch out.
Well, more on that. Last year around the playoff push in the West, I was referencing Club 4-5 in the Western Conference. Everybody wanted to be in Club 4-5, and that would be a matchup against the Wenatchee Wild, who fell after trading away their top players. Right now, the club in the East is to be in Club 2-7. If you can win the East Division, that's automatically, at the very least, going to get you the second seed in round one. You could be the fifth team in points. You could be behind Calgary and Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. But by way of winning that division, you get the 2 seed. You play 7, and that is a very, very attractive seed for those East Division teams. So Prince Albert, yeah, hell yeah, they're going for it. They made moves to go after it. Saskatoon hopes they can hold on. Swift Current is eyeing that as well. So is Brandon. So Club 2-7 is where these teams want to be this time around.
Fair enough.
Brandon's swap for Alec for Gavin was interesting. I like that trade.
It was a hockey trade, and 2 players that probably needed a fresh start. 2 and 3 in the draft year, they were drafted beside each other. So that's an interesting mark. And I think it sounds like Charlie Yellick needed a bit of a change of scenery there in Brandon. It just wasn't going well for him. He's a physical guy. Jordan Gavin, it was a smaller forward, and Tri-City plays a real heavy, big game. And Tri was in the sweepstakes to land a top-end defenseman. Bob Torrey said as much. That's what they were targeting and after. I don't think he thought that, he could get one by giving up Jordan Gavin and protecting most of his draft capital, but they were able to make it work. And that's a pretty formidable top 4D now in Tri-City.
Yeah, there was that report that went out prior, I think, about Molendyke going to Tri-City. I remember seeing something on Twitter about that.
Yeah, you can't believe everything you see on Twitter, boys. Okay,
No, heck no.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's too bad that comes out, but of course,
Yeah.
that's going to be the case all the time, right? Like, you're always going to have these reports in that. And I think even in that case, I want to say that Saskatoon Blades general manager actually replied to the report on Twitter, calling it completely false, or I don't know what he says. He completely false. I don't know what it was, but so yeah, I think that tweet. I think whoever that was, that tweet got deleted pretty quick. So.
Yeah, it's from our side of things, right? Like, it's really exciting, right? We're talking you guys behind the scenes. You're letting us know. But, man, would I not dare pick up our account and chime something in. I'd be like, if I get this wrong, it can go so many ways. I'm like, I just enjoy being in the conversation. Just the conversation's fine.
Yeah, you don't got to go out there and try to be Bobby Big trade breaker. You can just kind of, live your life and respond to what happens. When you start throwing out rumors and trade things with things that have not gone down, it can be kind of rattling for these guys. And I think there were several players around the deadline this year that were fairly rattled with all the chatter that was going on around them.
Well, it is kind of different, right? Because I guess you can say social media is just around its decade, just over a decade of alive. And of course, for the first while, it was heavy pro sports. But now we're seeing the amateur sports are also right there alongside in terms of the popularity, the fan bases, not just the want to know, but people who they need to know what's going on with their team. They need to know what's going on with their favorite player, with the assets that they get. So it has grown so much. And yeah, like you said, these aren't guys getting paid like pros most of the time. Some of them are even still going to school. So it's they're not expecting this in their life. And all of a sudden they're told they're moving. It could be from Kamloops, BC to Swift Current, right? Like, it could be a totally huge shift in something that they're not used to. Say they're a Vancouver boy or even an Edmonton or Calgary kid, or if they are from the States anywhere, right? That anything like that can be a huge shift. So it's definitely something that I would imagine that a lot of them just aren't used to. Their names being thrown out there, speculation, whether people are in, some people, right? Like, they're happy they're getting traded. Some are mad they're getting traded. I could see it being a very confusing time for these young guys.
Yeah, and there's a lot of moves, guys, we don't even know about that are probably even driven by agents that want to change scenery for their client that we're not privy to. We don't know. Some have requested a trade. A lot of these trades that happen are that you say like, wow, why did that happen? Why would they trade that guy? Probably because someone has requested to be moved and they find a willing dance partner of another player that's willing to be moved of that ilk. So that's why you see some of these deals done that you kind of scratch your head. Like, why would like Ryder Ritchie, Thomas Mercick? Well, players ask to be removed from their current situation. As a general manager, you don't always have to grant that, but if you want to keep good rapport with agents and, with parents and players and recruit, sometimes you have to kind of cut off the nose to spite the face.
Fair enough. That was one reason why I was surprised going back to Musty that he was still in Sudbury, refusing to report and then showing up and then getting injured. It just somehow either they convinced him to stay because then they added their pieces, or they just stonewalled him and they said, hey, look, you're not moving. Like, get used to it type thing. So like you said, it's a tough thing to navigate, especially to get the return on him. His return was diminished as soon as he said he wasn't coming back. Like, every other team is throwing low level players and low level picks at you because they're like, no, he doesn't want to be there. We're not going to pay you top premium assets for a guy that doesn't want to be on your team and isn't even in your roster night to night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised that Musty wasn't moved, I guess. But like you said, like Sudbury made those moves, and obviously they felt a need to, or he felt the need to stick around, and whether that was through the management talking to him or ownership or his agent just kind of giving it to him. Obviously there's something there. And one guy on Sudbury that has just had an unbelievable year this year is Kieran Walton. He's got 69 points in 39 games, 7th round draft pick by the Jets last year. I mean, that dude's just, he's taken over completely for Sudbury this season, and it's pretty cool to see. I mean, 6'6", big kid. But obviously, once Musty gets back in, that's going to be a fun team to watch out in the O.
For sure.
Talking about the OHL, and I know John, Colton, you guys are big with the WHL. What are your guys' predictions for the Memorial Cup? The 4 teams that are going to be there.
Ooh.
I got one. Rimouski.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Shocker.
That's my bid.
Yeah, that's a surprise.
Colton's probably more of the well-rounded CHL guy. You know, when the Blazers were hosting in 23, I was paying big attention to what was going on there, following all those series about who's it going to be, Peterborough, London, and, you know, in the Quebec League, there were some great series. But, you know, the OHL's in the bad books for me right now. After World Juniors and those performances here, I mean, they're off the team here. So, I don't know. But it's hard to bet against London, right? It's hard to bet against London. So, I'll just make an OHL prediction. I'll say London, and yeah, Rimouski we know will be there, and we'll see what else shakes out of the tree here between now and then.
I like London too. I mean, it's hard not to pick them. Everything that they got going with them, Cowan and Dickinson and Haltonen and Bonk and Medvinov or whatever his name is, their goaltender that is just unbelievable. That team is just going to do wonders this year, I think, in the playoffs and really find themselves back in a position to win a Memorial Cup. And then, obviously out of the queue, it's Rimouski. And then for me, I don't know. I don't know who the other team is because I really like Moncton, but Drummondville's been having a quietly good year. But I don't know. I guess Moncton probably would be my choice for second
I'd have
team
to
for the
agree
queue.
with you because Moncton just got probably the best goalie in the league, Mathis Rousseau from Halifax. They got a couple of guys from Halifax in the offseason. They got another veteran bottom 6 guy. So I'd say it's probably Moncton along with Rimouski.
Yeah, so
And Gardner McDougall. They have one of the best coaches in the CHL. So
yeah, he's a good coach. Damn good coach. So yeah, I think that's kind of my one. And then Spokane or Medicine Hat. But I don't know who to pick from that one. So I don't know. I think for the CHL stake, they probably would rather have Gavin McKenna on the big stage. But I could see Spokane doing it, man. I could see Spokane really just running it and going all the way.
Going back to the queue for a sec, guys. It's the only league in the CHL that does this. They do an NHL style draft. Do you think we could ever see something like that come to the WHL as well now?
I think it'd be interesting. Wait, how do they do an NHL style draft again?
Like, yeah, so they go to usually I think it's in the Videotron there. They actually have like what the NHL does. You know, all the parents, the players, the staff, the scouts, all in the stands. And they have the podium up front and the whole like draft board of every QMJHL team there. And they do like, you know, the first round, go up to the stage, shake the hand, put the jersey on, take the pictures of the, you know, top 3 picks. I think it's awesome. The O doesn't do that. The WHL doesn't do that. I would love to see it. Would you guys love to see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be great. The Western League is so massive, and the territory is so massive all the way down to the West Coast, California, Arizona. It'd be awful tough to get everybody in the same building. But remember, the NHL is kind of doing it differently. They're getting away from, you know, they're going centralized here. So, or decentralizing, I guess. So, yeah, I'd love to have that. You know, plus these players are also, you know, they're a year younger than the OHL draft. I think the Quebec League, I think they draft 16-year-olds. I'm not sure. But maybe the WHL looks to change their draft age, and maybe they look to do something like that in Calgary. Who knows? One can only hope.
I do have to add that into John's or to what John just said, the location, the space, the QMJHL, they do draft a lot of American players. And now with the NCAA rule change, probably going to see a lot more of those Northeastern states guys go up. And so that might affect it as well. The QMJHL might shy away from that in-person draft and say, hey, if we're going to have more of these American guys, why not just have it like online or something, or through a stream?
The whole thing, the reason why you do that is a recruiting tool, guys. That's all it is. It's a recruiting tool to get these 15-year-olds into their league and the 16-year-olds into the league. Well, now you don't ruin your eligibility by going to the CHL. So I don't think you have to really go as hard because you should, in theory, get those top players. They might leave early on you, but that whole recruiting battle between NCAA, BCHL out here, it's over. Like for me, it's over. It's done. So you should get those top players. I don't know if you got to put all the pizzazz and the lights and cameras and smoke and mirrors to make it happen anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because I just think it's a cool experience. Like, like you're not even in the NHL yet. You're not even at that level yet. And yet you're getting kind of that style of a draft, right? It's not online. It's not, by the phone call. It's like, yeah, I can kind of get the experience, a cool moment. Even if I never make it to the NHL, at least I feel, accomplished enough, special enough to have that kind of opportunity. I think it's a neat way to kind of congratulate, the athletes of making it to major junior, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, man,
absolutely.
being.
I think it's cool.
Like, what was it? Grade 9 would have been ours, I guess, and like not watching for myself, obviously, but we had Joe Hicketts, we had Ryan Gropp, we had Chad Butcher, Kyle Mikulowski, guys like that who were on our Tier 1 team, and seeing Kamloops pass on Joe, I mean, probably one of the most upset I've ever been for Jordan Thompson. They passed on. And it passed on Gropp too. Gropp went 8th to Seattle, and then Joe went 12th to Victoria. So obviously 2 extremely good players in their own right in the league. And for a guy who requested a trade, a year or 2 later home and never really panned out, that was tough to see.
Don't lie, you were looking to see your name pop up there too.
I was in house. There was no chance. There wasn't even a realm that I was going to see my name unless someone else had my name. But yeah,
that's great. I remember watching those. Like I remember being in grade 9 and being in computers class and watching that. And I remember seeing Kyle Mikulowski's name get drafted to the Calgary Hitmen. It was like somebody texted him or message. I can't remember how it went, but I thought that was so weird, like cool. Like somebody that I went to school with just got drafted into the WHL. It was pretty neat.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And those guys, the 3 guys, Chad Butcher with Med Hat, Ryan with Seattle, and Joe obviously all had fantastic junior careers. So it was cool to see that as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of Kamloops, obviously there's 5 members in here tonight that are from Kamloops. Is anyone here surprised that the Blazers kind of had a bit of a quiet deadline this go around?
I mean, John probably obviously is more tapped into that, but from what I had heard, there was no real plans to do really anything. So
as expected,
was there. So that's just kind of what I was told. There wasn't really any plans, and that the Blazers just felt like they could go with what they had, and they had a good team and try and push.
Well, I think the plan was to add. If they're going shopping, they were hoping to find the best ingredients, the gourmet ingredients to make up a team, but they were doing it on a dollar store budget. So a lot of these players that maybe they thought they could be in the realm to acquire, and we're not talking any of the big names, obviously, but just some depth pieces and names that were out there. I think they were in some of those conversations, but maybe too many assets or too high of picks were involved, and that sort of scared them off. I know they were in some other discussions, and they didn't pan out, but in the end, they get Rat Ravindal, who was great this past weekend, played more he said than he's ever played before, and they get a pretty experienced guy they can trust in Bo Courtney. So when you're sitting in 9th and 10th in the conference, you're not a team. I think a lot of people that I heard leading up were asking, are they trading Emmett Finney? Are they going to trade this guy? Like they could get a haul for Emmett Finney. And they probably could have, but you have to. Emmett Finney is so valuable for this team. What he does on the ice, everybody sees. What he does off the ice, people don't see that. He is a leader in every way, and he helps insulate our young draft eligible guys like Nathan Bame, Tommy Lafreniere. Where would they be without Emmett Finney? So you have to, in a way, also help your young guys get through some tough situations and put them in the best light possible for the NHL draft. And Emmett Finney is a guy that's the captain here. He's told me he didn't want to get moved. He wanted to be here, and I don't think the Blazers ever really entertained offers. There were calls. There were quite a number of calls down the stretch, especially when the team hit the Schneids, but it wasn't in the team's plans this year.
I respect Emmett Finney's journey so much, guys. Like, I remember just a few years back, he was making, the roster. There was cuts of guys like, Rowland, McPherson, Ridgewell, and Finney. He kept his head down. He worked so hard. Fast forward to now, he is the captain of this franchise, and he is such a good player, and I couldn't be happier for him. Like, his journey is awesome.
Yeah, fourth line for 2 years, 16 and 17. So,
awesome. Yeah. I was gonna say 0 goals in his first NHL or first WHL season. Like, I mean, talk about a guy that's just bounced back and really worked for it. And I had the opportunity to talk to him Saturday night after the game in Prince George, and what a humble human being. Like, what a great kid to just talk to and just kind of like just to bullshit with and ask him about hockey and what Grand Rapids was like and just all of that. Wonderful dude. And I talked to a Red Wing scout that was at the game, who I'm pretty sure was Greg Hawgood, and
love Greg.
Just talked really good about him and how he fits into that Detroit system. Detroit really likes him. They wanted him to kind of work on a couple things when he got back to Kamloops, but there's a lot of potential there, right? And I talked to another scout who's out in the West here, and he told me that Finney is a player that is always in the right place at the right time. And had they been able to draft him, they would have taken him. And so you've already got teams who are kind of like looking at this kid like, wow, he went in the 7th round. Maybe we should have taken a chance on him in the 5th or 6th. And then you look at the season he's having this year, it's great. And I think that's really good of him to want to stick with Kamloops, ride out the rest of his career and just do what he needs to do here. And it's good.
He's got so much pride and hustle in his game. It's awesome.
Yeah. 100%.
And John,
he's going to be good.
You mentioned Bame, John. What is your thoughts on his draft stock this year? I've seen him basically anywhere from 25th to 45th. What are you kind of hearing and seeing in terms of his draft stock? Like you said, he's playing with Finney. That may help it. That may hurt it, depending on what scout is looking at it. Is he being pushed or is he pulling, right? So what's your guys' thought on him?
Well, when the midterm rankings came out today, as we record this, I was kind of holding my breath to see where NHL Central Scouting still thought of him, and I think at 31, that's good. I think he was happy with that. He's really been up and down this year so far, though. He had a great September, October. Was the team's player of the month. Kind of had a struggle of November, but I thought his bounce back here most recently, guys, that he can be a top draft eligible guy. NHL scouts see him. He's got the NHL body already. He's 6'1", 6'2", and he does some skill things out there that are really things that you would not expect a 17-year-old to do. He has to work on some of the finer details of his game. He has to learn better play in his own end. He has to be a little bit more determined sometimes. But I think NHL teams will see this guy with such raw natural ability, who's an athlete, who was a long drive champion in his age division, who was a pitcher at the Little League World Series. He has this pedigree already at 17. And I think you're going to see a team, I wouldn't say take a chance on him, but maybe draft him higher than maybe some of these ranking reports and Central Scouting has him listed come the draft.
What a phenomenal start he's had of this season too. Like, he was leading the league in scoring as well. So yeah, he's got a lot of good things coming his way, Nathan Bame.
Well, and he's not even our only guy on the rankings either. We got
Steven
Tommy
Ellis.
Lafreniere too.
Yeah, Tony's a great guy. Tommy's a great guy. Tommy's awesome. So pumped with him, going up the rankings. Big smile on his face when he learned he was 86 today. He was a W rank to start back when they put out the prelims. So that, I think, signifies a late round pick. So I said, Tommy, we're pushing for top 50 here. Okay. We got to get you going, keep your good attitude, keep your demeanor, keep flying around out there, and hopefully he continues to climb.
Were you going to say something there, Colton?
I was, but that's okay.
Okay.
All I was going to say was that Stephen Ellis of Daily Faceoff has Bame ranked 27th on his latest draft rankings. So
Nice.
that's good. Yeah. He's a big fan of Bame. He's an even bigger fan of Lafreniere. And so am I. So I love Tommy. He's so good.
Talking about the central scouting rankings that came out today, this one kind of for John and Colton, not talking about the WHL so much, but back at the World Juniors, we saw Matthew Schaefer take that friggin' crossbar post to the shoulder blade, and he's out. But everyone thought that was going to drop his draft stock, but obviously most people thought it didn't, as he still sits number one. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I love seeing, a player like that, take over. First of all, there's no Americans in the house, right? But we want a Canadian on top of those NHL Central Scoutings, and he surpasses Hagens, right? So I'm all for that. And Matthew Schaefer blue line at World Juniors next year, perhaps with Harrison Brunick. I think that'd be pretty special. And Schaefer wasn't a guy I was really overly familiar with. My focus is the Western Hockey League. But you just see the way he moves around there, and everybody talking in the circles, even on that Hockey Canada, that management team, they're like, "Whoa, this guy's the real deal." It's unfortunate about the clavicle. That's a long-term injury. But good on him. It's nice to have a Canadian at the top of the rankings, and hope he can come back and hopefully get taken first overall or be in that conversation.
100%.
Yeah, really in a draft where it was
he's going first,
right?
So yeah,
I still think Hagens is going first. I still think that the prejudice secretly deep down in every GM's heart is if I don't take the elite centerman, ownership's not going to be too happy with me, right? Centerman is such an important position, and we just saw him dominate with two elite players. So I still think no matter what rankings say, he's going to go number one. Because if you take a defenseman number one and it doesn't work out, you end up with an Eric Johnson, right? But if you take a centerman number one and it doesn't work out, you could end up with a lot of really good players still that are on the list of not great but good NHLers that went first overall. So, like Nugent Hopkins, right? Didn't really pan out, but he's fantastic still.
Yeah, it's to add to it. You're right on that. And sometimes you need to have a little bit of sizzle with the steak you sell. Like if you're like an American fan base in Florida or Tampa Bay, we know they're not drafting first overall, but if you're in one of these markets, and you're trying to get your fan base excited, like you can't exactly go to your fan base and be like, look how smooth of a skater he is, and look how well he defends and retrieves pucks. They're like, we don't care. We want somebody to score goals and bring us out of our seat. Like, the defenseman definitely is a little bit underrated when it comes to that. Like fan bases, they want to see that flash dash number one. They want someone they can, put a highlight reel package together and sell season tickets and corporate sponsorship. So definitely, the forward is always the favorite, usually in a situation like that.
Yeah, I don't think he'll go number one, Schaefer, but he should. Like he's that good. But Hagens is a great player too, so.
From everybody I've talked to, Schaefer's going one still. So
nice.
We'll see. But I personally think though that the rankings don't matter until the teams get the lottery results. Like it matters what team's gonna pick, right? Like and where. Because if Chicago has the number one overall pick, you think they're gonna go for another center? Or are they going to go for another defenseman with Levshunov? It's like they already have Levshunov, so do they go with Schaefer? No, probably not. So then where do they go, right? I don't know. That's kind of how I see it. Like it really matters where and what team is picking in the top three in order to round that out. But you still pick the best player available, right? I think that's the long story short. So
yeah, I don't know if it matters, but yesterday Levshunov was a scratch in the AHL. Now, people obviously are blowing it up way too much. He's a young kid. Maybe they just wanted to give him the night off. But there was a lot of speculation that maybe the Blackhawks aren't happy with him that I was reading off that. But again, one game, you're just trying to give a kid a chance to see it from a different perspective. That's my thought on it, at least. I don't read too much into it, but lots of people that were speculating that, him and Korchinski both, right? They're both they're good, but are they going to be that elite defenseman? I don't think Korchinski has it, but I don't see why Levshunov can't. He's a great player.
There's a few people I've talked to that are wondering about Korchinski, though, and whether Chicago will move on from him sooner than people expect, just because of what Chicago has in their prospect pool with Levshunov and with Del Mastro and with Nolan Allen and all these other defensemen that are kind of coming up, and Alex Vlasik's playing a big role. I don't know. I liked Korchinski. I thought he had a great season in Seattle. But I think they kind of rushed him a little bit in Chicago. They let him play that pretty much a full year last year, and they probably should not have let that happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, he's pure offense too, right? And that is so hard as a young guy to then all of a sudden come to the NHL, like you said, and be like, obviously they kind of had the reins off and they let him try to figure his game out, but it's so hard for him to learn the defensive aspect in the NHL without learning it at lower levels, right? So that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was rushed a little too much into the NHL right off the bat. Then let him time to develop his game into the next level.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I will say this though, it was a pest to play against when the T-Birds were in town, especially for those few playoff rounds in 22 and 23.
Yeah, and Korchinski, like if you're Seattle, I think you're fully expecting him back, for his 19-year-old season, and they could have probably recouped a lot of picks because I think the core of that team was still Sawyer Mineo, and I think that they could have probably flipped him for 8 or 9 assets for sure, and then insult to injury, he's in the American League the next year, so it's like, oh my God, like you're totally hoping that you get a guy like that back. And, Kamloops might be in the situation next year with Harrison Brunick at 19. I think Pittsburgh will give him a shot. The fact that he's been injured most of the year might hurt those chances to make the Penguins. But, I think that'll be a question that we'll see in Kamloops. That'll be a big one in the fall next year.
Well, I think we can end it there. We're literally coming up right on an hour. We don't want to take all of your guys' night away. Thank you, Colton. Thank you, Jon, for being here. Both now officially of the Kamloops Blazers. Colton, of course, still with Daily Faceoff. Again, just want to thank you both. Thanks, all you gents. This is the biggest group we've had on here with 8 guys, so this was a blast.
There's 7.
It. Or 7, sorry. Either way.
Well, like I said before, guys, I'm pumped to come on and share, especially with the Kamloops guys. The fact that you guys are interested in this and you got the jerseys in the back, you're wearing the Blazer colors. I mean, I got all the time in the world for this year. And it's a small town, and, we all know people who know each other, and we're probably 2 degrees of separation on a lot of things. So always pumped to help out the local guys. And for the guys out east, nice to meet you and have a chat about hockey here tonight.
Thanks, Jon.
Thanks, guys.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, likewise. Pleasure joining you guys. Love being here. You guys are fun to talk to, and obviously connecting with Jon. And nice to see you again. I just saw you on Saturday, so it's great. I love this.
I'll teach you the secret handshake here on the weekend, okay, or something like that.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, we'll just finish up by saying, for anyone that did watch all the way through, thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind subscribing to the YouTube channel, liking this video, and following us on social media at Gameday Tarps. We got Daeden at Blue Nose Hockey and Wilbs at Wilbs Puck. That'd be much appreciated. And we'll see everyone in episode 50. It's going to be big. We have no idea what we're doing, but we're going to plan it. So see you guys in the next one.